from Shabbos Parshas Ba'aloischa. They share Haftorahs because in both of them, Ba'aloischa talks about the Menoira and the Beis Hamikdash, the mitzvah of lighting the Menoira, and also Shabbos Chanukah is about the Menoira. So there is in the Haftorah it speaks about the vision of Zechariah Hanavi, that Zechariah Hanavi saw a vision of a Menoira, and we're going to speak about the symbolism of the Menoira as being related to Klal Yisrael, that the entire Klal Yisrael is likened to a golden menorah, a pure golden menorah, which is greater than how even the other Nevi'im spoke about Klal Yisrael. Okay, so this is a maimer from Shabbos Parshas Miketz, like this year Shabbos Parshas Miketz, Shabbos Chanukah, and it's Tafshin Lamed Beis. The Raisi, the Navi Zechariah says, I saw in my vision, V'hine Menoras of Kula, an entire golden menorah. The entire menorah was made out of gold. V'gula al roisha, v'goyla al roisha. It means the simple meaning. We're going to have a different explanation for this later on, but the simple meaning of this is that it had like this oil container or this oil pitcher over it. Then he says in the brackets, like I mentioned, that it's also connected with Parshas Ba'aloischa. So he says, Maimer divrei maskel zebel Likutei Torah nitvus Parshas Ba'aloischa. This is a Maimer that's in Likutei Torah of the Alter Rebbe. But when you look it up in Likutei Torah, you're not going to find it under Chanukah. You're going to find it under Parshas Ba'aloischa. But when we look at the manuscripts, the original, what he calls booklets, Nemar Parshas Chanukah, it seems to indicate that it was actually said on Parshas Chanukah, though when they printed it in the Sefer Likutei Torah, it's printed under Parshas Ba'aloischa. And then the Rebbe goes on and says, V'gam b'bichul Tavkuf Samaches Shiatzel Atal Oir, also in the manuscript of the year Tavkuf Samaches, that was just now printed in Tafshin Lamed Beis, Nimtza Abir Shel Likutei Torah al Maimer Zeh. There's an explanation of Likutei Torah on this Maimer, because of Love Shu Bir L'Drush Chanukah. It says that it's an explanation for the Maimer of Chanukah. So we see that really this Maimer was said on Chanukah, even though it's something that's in the Likutei Torah printed under Ba'aloischa. Okay, that's more like for the scholarly people. I'd like to know when and where this Maimer was said and so on. Anyway, so going back to the Maimer of the Alter Rebbe, that the Rebbe is going to analyze the words of the Alter Rebbe. Now, in the Maimer of the Alter Rebbe, of this title, he explains the Menoras of Kula Koyal Knas Yisrael, that an entirely gold menorah is referring to Klal Yisrael. And the 7 branches, the 7 candles themselves, these are the 7 types, 7 categories of service that are to be found amongst Klal Yisrael. That it came to the Klal Yisrael from what are called the 7 shepherds. The Chazal, there's a pasuk that says that I will raise up for the Yidden 7 shepherds and 8 princes, and the 7 shepherds begins from Avram, Yitzchak, Yankov, and others who are known to be shepherds of Klal Yisrael. And just like a shepherd takes care about feeding their flock, the same thing the shepherds of Klal Yisrael feed Klal Yisrael their service of Hashem. So now their service of Hashem is that they're being fed is this. Avram feeds them the avoid of love, which is one branch of the menorah, because Avram his service of Hashem was with love, and Yitzchak, who he served Hashem with awe, so he feeds the branch of Klal Yisrael that their service of Hashem is primarily with awe, etc., etc. So the Rebbe is now going to explain what does it mean when it says that it's 7 branches, or it's a menorah, it's a menorah that's entirely gold. Because when you're dealing with 7 branches, one might think that it's not entirely gold. Every branch is its own thing, so maybe one is not as good as the other. So he says, one could say, just like the Yidden are distinct and divided in the type of service that they do, because each one is distinct. Certain Yidden serve Hashem with love, certain Yidden serve Hashem with awe, etc., etc. There would be reason to believe that in other matters the Yidden are also differentiated and distinct and separate. That's why the pasuk has to tell you, L'chein Omer, that's why it says, Zahav Kula, it's entirely gold. That all the Yidden are golden, every Avodah is golden. So the question is this true at present, that we are all in a state of gold? So he says, V'ine b'medrash, Yisa in the medrash, it's brought down the Koya, Allah said, love, it's referring to Mashiach's times. In Mashiach's times, we are all gold. The Medrash says, because in this world there is still waste mixed in, so we're not entirely gold. There's golden parts and there's parts that are not gold. But for the future time, Amr Zachariah said, Menoras of Kula, they're an entire golden menorah. The Mashiach comes, it says that you will be entirely beautiful, my beloved, like it says in the pasuk in Shir Hashirim. That is one medrash. But the Rebbe is going to bring that really there's another medrash that says that the Yidden being entirely gold is something that is applicable even now. But in a different place in the medrash, it's obvious from it. The Koi Gamal is Manda Achshav, that when Zechariah said that Yidden are entirely gold, it's also referring to the present time. The Isa Sham, it's brought down this other medrash that he contrasts different descriptions that different Nevi'im spoke about Klal Yisrael. Yirmiyah Aimer Kesef Nimas Korelehem. Yirmiyah Navi said that the Jewish people are considered despised silver. He called them, that Hashem called them silver that he despises. Yecheskel Navi Kairaisim Sigim, he even calls them less. He calls them dross. Dross is what's left over, the waste product. After you melt down precious metals and you separate it from the junk metals or junk minerals, so that's the sigim, is what's left over, the dross. So that's what Yecheskel Navi calls the Yidden. So the Medrash says, not like Yirmiyahu called them despised silver, not like Yecheskel called them dross, but Zechariah v'Amar, Zechariah came and said, Rahisi v'ine mezerzav kula. Behold, I've seen it, an entirely golden menorah. Shel zahav hi kula, the Medrash goes on to say, it's entirely gold. L'kayim mashakasav, to support and fulfill what it says. Kulech yafech rayasi, that it's entirely, you're entirely beautiful, my beloved. Because, so from the fact that he's contrasting what Yirmiyahu Navi said, and Yecheskel Navi said, and Zechariah said, obviously it must be talking about now, or else what's the contrast? They were talking about one period, and Zechariah is talking about a different period. From this it's indicated that when Zechariah calls the Eden entirely golden, an entirely golden menorah, it's referring also on our time. The Mash Yirmiyahu Yecheskel Dibru B'Tach Samusa, the fact that Yirmiyahu and Yecheskel spoke in an ultimate state of rebuke. In that time, Zechariah came and said it's entirely golden. And not just in that time, but he was, let's say, in a lower time, as we're soon going to explain. Even more so, the Zechariah in the order of when they lived, Zechariah followed Yirmiyahu and Yecheskel. They lived before the destruction of the first Beis HaMikdash. Chagi, Zechariah, Malachi, and these three Nevi'im, which were the final three Nevi'im, they lived in the time of the second Beis HaMikdash, at least at the beginning of the second Beis HaMikdash. And we know the second Beis HaMikdash lacked five things: the Aron, the Kapoiras, whatever that was there in the first Beis HaMikdash. And despite the fact that Yirmiyahu and Yecheskel that were in the first Beis HaMikdash spoke harshly against the Yidden, Yirmiyahu and Navi still, B'cholza Amar Menoras of Kula, even though he lived in the time of the second Beis HaMikdash, where things were seemingly on a lower level. And the truth is, he didn't say it when they had already, when the second Beis HaMikdash was already built. That Zechariah said it even in the time of Golas Bavel. So it seems really a wonder. Yirmiyahu and Cheskel, in the times of the first destruction, the time of the first base of Mikdash, they called the Yidden by such, very harsh terms. And Zechariah, who was in times of Gol's Bavel, called them entirely gold. Everybody is gold. So the Rebbe says, this itself is the reason why. Moving from this understood, he understands the very reason that he called them gold was because they were in Golus. Because they were in the time of exile. Kula, he says that they're entirely a golden menorah. The exile of Bavel is the first of the 4 exiles. We know there's Golus Mitzrayim. So he said, a lot of times we don't count Golus Mitzrayim as in the category of the exiles because it preceded them, it's higher than them. He says in the brackets, the Golus Mitzrayim, he Golus Klali. The exile Mitzrayim is a general Golus that's not like the rest of them. The Chol HaGolius Nikrad Shem Mitzrayim, it says that the Chazal say that all the exiles are called by the name of Mitzrayim. The Gam Shoykoid Matan Torah, and it was also before Matan Torah, so they weren't really the same type of Golus, which was a punishment that the Yidden received later on. Rather, Vaschol Seder Adal Golius, Bavel, the beginning of the order of the 4 exiles that the Medrash usually speaks about 4 exiles, it begins from Bavel. Again, there's different places where different Amorei Chazal, different explanations. Does it begin from Golus Mitzrayim? That's not really the concern of this Maimer here. Shehi Reisha de Dahava, it's the head of gold. In the dream that Daniel interpreted for Nebuchadnezzar, that he saw this huge statue that had a golden head and had copper parts of his body and clay and so on. So the head of gold he interpreted as going on Bavel. So in other words, Bavel is considered the first, and it has to do with gold, as we'll soon explain. And we know 3 lines in the bottom of the page. The Chazal say that Hashem did a tzedakah that with the Yidden, they scattered them amongst the nations. In this case, what's the tzedakah that he scattered them amongst the nations? Because Golus brings out and causes that every Yid should be golden. Before the time of Golus, in the times of Yirmiyahu, the times of Yecheskel, there could be harsh descriptions about the Yidden. But Davke and Golus, that's the tzedakah that Hashem did. That's the charitable thing that Hashem did, sending us into Golus, because through Golus, we reach the level of everybody being entirely gold. Only through this it becomes entirely gold. Because despite the fact that amongst the Jewish people there are many different types and categories, and on all these different types and categories, he says that they are entirely golden. That gold is the most highest and the most precious of all things. Therefore, it's counted the first of all the items and materials that from which the Mishkan was built. Like it says, also Beis Hamikdash, it's the first thing, but like it says in Parshas Teruma, it was gold, silver, and bronze or copper. Now he says a side thing, but there were other precious things that he's counted, the shoyam stones and the stones that were in the breastplate. That's not called part of the building of the Mishkan. They were part of the priestly garments. So it doesn't fall into this category. But the first thing in the building of the Mishkan is gold, which means that's the highest level. So that's the same thing that we're talking about the Eden. That's what he says that in the time of the exile. They were entirely golden menorah. This means that the Yidden during exile are they're in the ultimate and highest level and quality. Just like in the actual making of the menorah. It had to be hammered out from gold till its leg and up until its flowers. The design on the up on the top of the candles of the candelabrum. Upirish Rashi explains how was this done. Eshet shel kikar zav. It was a solid kikar loaf, quote unquote, of gold. A solid piece of gold. I saw the menorah originally started out umakish bekurnas, and he would hammer it out with a hammer till he shaped it into a menorah. It wasn't made of pieces. It was one solid piece that was hammered out into the shape of the menorah. So just like the physical menorah was that way, the same thing, Klal Yisrael are also one piece. So too, it's by the Jewish people. The leg of the menorah, which is Klal Yisrael, is referring to the lowest levels of the Yidden, just like the leg is the lower part of the body. Until we know that the leg, even the thigh, is considered outside of the trunk. The trunk of the body is not where the leg is. The leg extends. It's called an extremity. It comes out of the body. So Yerecha goes on the lowest levels of the menorah of Klal Yisrael. Upircha koi al madreges al yonis. The blossom, the flower of the menorah is referring to the most highest levels of Klal Yisrael. Like it says that Yisrael being the quality name of the Eden, not Yaakov, but Yisrael first sprouted and blossomed. So we see the perach, the pircha, the blossom, the flower, that goes on the highest levels. And despite the fact that there's these differences, there is the flower and there is the leg of the menorah, the highest and the lowest. Valze oimer miksha. Concerning this, he says it's hammered out. Shaideha kosher, the Alter Rebbe says in L'Chutei Torah a very interesting thing, that when you hammer out something, what is above can come down. What's found above goes down. What's found below goes up above. In other words, that's the idea of being hammered out. This is the ultimate unity, that it's one entity, and there's the top goes to the bottom and the bottom goes to the top. So now the Rebbe is going to bring from the Tzemach Tzedek that the Tzemach Tzedek says that the unity over here in the menorah, Chassidus talks a lot about unity. There's this type of unity, that type of unity. He brings from the Tzemach Tzedek that this unity is over here, a unity that surpasses anything else. Like many times in Chassidus, whenever we come to a certain thing, this thing is greater than everything else. Tzemach Tzedek explains the miksha shuchaticha achas, miksha that is really one block, one piece of gold. It hints at a very high level, al derech yachid shalamayla me'echad, similar to the word yachid, which is singular, a single entity that is higher than echad. Echad, we know, is a unity of parts. Yachid is a single, solid entity. The Tzemach Tzedek says that even though the Bechaye also says that there is unity over here in the menorah, and it symbolizes unity about Klal Yisrael, but the Bechaye is lacking this ultimate unity. That the Bechaye says shemiksha roimes la'achdas, that hammered out shows only on the unity of echad, not yachid. Shezeu in Sroid HaChaim, that he says it's called the bond of life, that when things are bound together, when you bind things together, it means they're two separate entities that are being bound. That he means to say Tzroir Loshen, I think it's supposed to say kesher over here, not kosher. It's supposed from the word a bond, a knot, v'dibuk v'achdus, that's cleaving and unity, but it's a unity of parts. So the Tzemach Tzedek says, not like the Bechaye says about miksha, but miksha is greater. that when you have one solid piece and you hammer it out, it's kiyim b'chinas yachid, it's actually a single entity. The achdus, when you use the term achdus, which the Bechaya uses, it indicates that they are two separate entities. The only thing is that these separate entities are joined together. And we know that when there's separate entities that are joined together, you can have the entities that are joined are not on the same level. That they're bound up with each other and they're cleaving to each other, so it's not of the same level when you bind together two different things. Until you bind them together, until they become as one. But the Mekal Makim Yesh Eze Inshal Ischalkas, there's still some matter of division and separation. What's the level of Yachid? That initially at its core it's one entity. That's the level that it's hammered out. That is essentially what the Tzemach Tzedek is saying, and now the Rebbe is going to elaborate even more. Moving for this understood, that when we talk about the Yidden being hammered out into one menorah, that is higher even than the unity that it says in Parshas Nitzavim, you are standing today, all of you. He analyzes and he says the word kulchem. Why does it have to say kulchem? It should say atem nitzavim ayom roshechem shiftechem. What's the word kulchem? So the Alter Rebbe says the word kulchem means all of you, means that you are as one. You're one as one. Still in all, what do we see? It says later in the pasuk, Mikol Makim Yeshna Yischalkas Madregis Roshechem v'chulu. That there's still division of levels, that your heads of your tribes and your elders and your water carriers, etc. Ella, despite the fact that there's a division, Shem ba'ofen shel kulchem v'chulu, they're in a way that they're all together, they're joined together, these different parts. Sha'af she'ein by b'chinas roish v'soif. Though there's no head and end, beginning and end, like we're soon going to explain what it means there's no beginning and end. V'roish yachol lekabel ma'regel, and the head can receive from the foot. For example, kishmakizim da ma'regel b'shul keiv shemaroish, that sometimes they could let blood from the foot because of a pain in the head. So we see how they're interconnected. Because or else, what does it help to have bloodletting on the foot? Or in more modern terms, Chinese medicine might, poke, do acupuncture or acupressure in the foot to help a headache, etc. Vagam, another thing that we see the unity of the foot and the head is that in travel, the foot is the head, because the foot is the one that's able to bring the head to a place that the head without the foot would not be able to come there. So there's a unity between them. They work together. Yet despite that unity, it's still, this is a head and this is a foot. It's only in regards that when it comes to relieving the pain in the head, or when it comes to moving from point A to point B, so the head has to receive from the foot. Despite that, the foot remains down here below. That is all the way it's hinted in Parshas Nitzavim. But in our Parsha, where we talk about Miksha Achas, or not our Parsha, but the idea of what Chanukah symbolized, the menorah, the Beis HaMikdash, that was hammered out from one piece of gold, that shows on something much greater. But the idea of being hammered out, the upper part, we said before, from the Alter Rebbe Torah descends below. And the part below goes upwards. And this level of Miksha is specifically in the time of Golus, like we said before. Because in the time of exile, it's a golden menorah. In the times of Yirmiyahu and Yecheskel, it wasn't, Eden weren't called entirely gold. Only in the time of exile, when Zechariah lived and said this nevuah, that's when Eden are entirely gold. And because of that, they have this solid state that they're all together as one. And the Rebbe is going to explain that we actually see in halacha a connection between the menorah being out of gold and being hammered out of one piece. Listen to this interesting halacha. Like the Rambam wrote, when we say that the menorah has to be hammered out from one solid piece, you cannot put it together from different pieces. It's only when the menorah is out of gold, because if need be, like we'll soon explain, if there's not enough money, if they can't afford it, we can make a menorah from other metals. But if the menorah was made, I think in the times of the Chashmonoim, or perhaps earlier, there was a time when the Yidden were very poor when they first came back from Bavel, that they made it out of aluminum or tin. When it's made out of other metals, for example, in a time when the Beis Hamikdash wasn't rich, couldn't afford it. So then the halach is afilu eina miksha ksheira. Even if it's not solid, if it's not made from one piece, hammered out from one piece, it's kosher. So what do we see from here? We see the linkage between all the Yidden being gold and the idea that they are hammered out from one piece. They are completely united, even a greater unity than the unity of Atam Nitzav Mayim Kulchem. So now he's going to go on to another description of the menorah that Yecheskel saw. V'zeu gamke, 2 lines in the bottom. V'zeu gamke, mashem mamshech v'gula al roisho. That's also what he continues. That there was, again, the literal translation of the word was this like pitcher of gold that was over the menorah, with which they used to fill up the oil of the menorah in that vision of Zechariah. Yesh b'zeh pirushim. There are 2 explanations behind what is the spiritual meaning of this gula. So the word gula, chad amar v'goyla lashon golus. One says that golus in the word exile, v'chad amar goyala, and one says that's from the word her redeemer. As we always know, goyla and gula are related. Manda amar goyla, the one that says that's from the word exile, shegila lebavel, that the Yidden went into exile at that time into Bavel. That's when it took place, this prophecy of Zechariah. The Shechina went into exile with them. On top of the next page, v'chulu, like he continues and it says, and the one that says her redeemer, Peruka, the one that takes her out of Golus. Shenemar, Goyaleinu Hashem Tzvakei Shemai, that our redeemer Hashem Tzvakei is his name. V'chosv, it says, Allah Peiritz of name v'goyim Hashem B'roisham, that the one that will burst forth, that will break through all the barriers, will go up before them, and Hashem is at their head. So the Rebbe says, he connects the 2 explanations. The explanation of Golus and Geula of Yesh Loimar, Sha'idei Bechinas Goyla Shuina Golus Bavel, through the level of exile. That's talking about the exile of Bavel, Magim Legoyla Melashon Gula, Legula Melashon Gula. We reach to the level of Gula from the word redemption. We also find this in Golus Mitzrayim, that it says in Yeshaya Hanavi, this is also the Haftorah of Parshas Shmois, Sha'idei Haboim Yashrish Yaakov, that when those that came, Yaakov took root. Where did he take root? So the Rebbe explains that part of the pasuk, Begolus Mitzrayim, in the exile Mitzrayim. Hayacharkach followed what it says further in that pasuk in Yeshaya, Yotzitzu Parach Yisrael. It sprouted and blossomed Yisrael. So we see through the Golus came the sprouting and the blossoming. So that was Mitzrayim. So just like it was Mitzrayim, Al Derech Zeh Begolus Bavel, in a similar vein by the exile of Bavel, the Yisrael Nikraim Zrubavel. Yidden are called Zerubbabel, even though Zerubbabel was also a name of a certain leader of the Yidden, but also Zerubbabel, the Chazal say, goes on the Jewish people, Meloshen Zerabavel, that which is planted in Bavel, the seed of and in Bavel, it's planted in. What does that mean, that it's planted in Bavel? The Koyal calls Yisrael, it's referring to Klal Yisrael in general, that they are planted in Bavel. I will plant the Eden, animals, human seed and animal seed, that he plants them in goals. Like we said earlier, and Hashem did a righteousness that He scattered them amongst the nations. And then they refined Bechinas, I think it's supposed to say Reisha the Dhava, which you had before, the golden head that was in the vision that the Neil interpreted the dream. In through the Yidden going into Golus, we said before, Nasu Menoras of Kula, they became entirely a golden menorah, because Yatitzu Parach Yisrael v'Chula, the Yidden sprouted forth and blossomed and reached the highest levels. So now the Rebbe is going to continue that further in the words of the Haftarah of Zechariah. It says afterwards, when it's describing over there the menorah that Zechariah Navi saw, that there were two olive trees, one from the right and one from the left. So the Rebbe is going to explain the significance of this. A neir, a candle, is made up of two things: shemen upsila, oil and a wick. Shemen upsila. One thing is the oil and the wick, shemadlik behem, that is what is lit and is fuel and so on. And then the second thing is v'hakli hamachzik b'soich Hashem v'apsila, and there's the container, the vessel that actually in it is the oil and the wick. The oil and the wick is the idea of mitzvahs, like it says, that it says that the mitzvah is like a candle and the Torah is the oil. So therefore the same thing, the fire has to do with the wick, and the mitzvahs are the oil that supplies the fuel for the fire, for the etc. Vakli, what is the vessel that holds the oil and the wick? What's the vessel for Torah mitzvahs? Hem neshamas Yisrael. That's the neshamas of Yidden. Shebehem zara kadosh baruch mitzvahs. That in the Yidden Hashem planted the mitzvahs. Vehem hakli kibul lakabla mitzvahs. They are the receptacle to contain and receive within them the mitzvahs. Because if you only have oil and a wick and you don't have a container, nothing's going to happen. The same thing if you have mitzvahs without a Jew, nothing's going to happen either. Because a non-Jew that puts on film does not affect anything through this. I remember on Mitzvahim in Eretz Yisrael, a joke used to go around when we used to ask the Israelis in Hebrew, Hinachta tefillin hayom. Did you put on tefillin today? So they used to answer, Ken. Yes, Hinachti otam ba'aron. I placed them in the closet, whatever. I put them away in their place. If it's on a desk. If it's in the closet, it doesn't do anything. The Yid has to be the vessel for the oil and the wick of Torah mitzvahs. But Dafki Yisrael is only Yidden Heim Bechinas HaKelim Shebehem Nizram mitzvahs. They are the vessels that in which the mitzvahs are planted in. Just like a candle. Only when it's lit does it arrive at its perfection. If you just have oil, if you just have a wick, it serves no purpose. It's imperfect. So too, it's by the Jewish people, the kindling of the menorah is the fact that the Torah is called the fire, meaning kindling the menorah means revealing the delight that's in the mitzvahs, that He sanctified us in His mitzvahs and He commanded us. This delight vehicle that's able to reveal the delight in the mitzvahs is through the chachma, the wisdom of Hashem that's embedded in Torah. Because chachma vitalizes, energizes, and enlivens. So that is one part that the Maimer says. And then he goes in even deeper. That chachma taps into an even higher level. And afterwards, the Maimer, the Alter Rebbe L'Kutei Torah, continues that the Oidish Leimer additionally similar to what's explained, that the inner level of Chachma, which is called father, because Chachma Bina is father and mother, like we're soon going to have in Tanya, is the inner part of Atik, which Atik And the level of Atik, which is the inner level of Keser, that's the essential delight that's higher than will. Will is to be found in mitzvahs. Mitzvahs are Hashem's will. Chachma, which is Hashem's Torah, taps into the delight that comes about through Torah. So now he says, these two levels of Torah, that you have the level of Chachma of Torah and the delight of Torah, when it says, additionally, the inner level of Abba reaches the inner level of delight. These are not two different explanations, but there are two levels of Torah. There is the delight of Torah, the inner part of the Torah, the secrets of the Torah, that the Rebbe explained in a previous mimer about this. And then there's the revealed part of Torah, which only the Chachma is visible. So you have the delight that Torah reveals, the delight in the mitzvahs, the enjoyment, the pleasure of Hashem in the mitzvahs, and therefore gives us delight from the mitzvahs as well. But we started off this paragraph with talking about the two olive trees. This is all explaining the wick, the oil, the container that holds the oil. What are the olive trees about? So this high level of the delight should come down. It's through the olives. An olive, it's brought down, the Chazal speaks about it, it has bitterness in it. Bitterness signifies the idea of bittul in the service of Hashem. Just like a student at the beginning of his study, it has to be his lips are dripping the spice called myrrh. But Chazal say, Al tikra moir ela mar. Do not read it moir, rather read it mar, meaning bitterness. What does that mean, bitterness? That when you're first sitting down to learn, you need to have this type of bittul to be able to receive the great wisdom of Hashem. This means only through prefacing that you first have that my soul is like dust before all, like we say in the end of Shemoneh Esrei, then my heart can be open to your Torah, because that is the vehicle for revealing these high levels in Torah, the Chachma of Torah, the delight that Torah communicates. What does that mean practically in our life? What is that bittul that enables this drawing down of the great delight of Hashem, and that we should experience the delight in mitzvahs? That's first accepting upon ourselves the yoke of heaven in general. And afterwards accepting upon ourselves the yoke of mitzvahs. These are the two olive trees. One shows on the general Kabbalah soil, just accepting Hashem as our king. And then the next thing is accepting all the decrees, all the mitzvahs that He gives us as binding upon us. And then from there, we come to appreciating the Chachma of Torah, the delight, and we have the delight in Torah mitzvahs as well. Bottom two lines of the page. In a similar vein, in candles itself, there are two types of levels of candles, similar to the two types of levels of Torah. The two types of candles, that the Neiris in the Beis HaMikdash, that the idea of the Neiris in the Beis HaMikdash was to illuminate, the Neiris Chanukah and the candles of Chanukah that was beyond the level of illumination. Shal Neiris Elu Amru, concerning these candles, the candles of Chanukah, last page of the Maimer, the Chazal say, Shal Neiris Alalu Einam Betelis La'olam, that these candles will never cease, because the Beis HaMikdash candles we know, after the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, there was no more than the candles of the Beis HaMikdash. But only through the Neiris Chanukah, which we light now, even in exile, so it's ongoing forever. It never stops. It's an everlasting matter. How come? Why is it everlasting? Because it comes from Hashem's very essence. And just like Hashem is unchanging, and so too the Neiris Chanukah are unchanging. This is what the Chazal say. All the Yom Tovim will cease when Mashiach comes, except for the Yom Tov of Chanukah and Purim. Though we know that the Rambam teaches us, part of the 13 principles of faith, that Torah will never change, which means even when Mashiach comes, it will never change. We also know in a different place that Torah is everlasting, like the Alter Rebbe brings down in Tanya. So how do we say that all the Yom Tovim will cease except for Chanukah and Purim if Torah will never change? How can you tell me no Sukkot anymore, no Pesach, no Rosh Hashanah? It's impossible. It's one of the 13 principles of faith that Torah is unchanging. So it's explained in a different place. What does it mean that when the Chazal say that all the Yom Tovim will cease except for Chanukah and Purim? That it means the Masha Kala Moedim Betelim, it doesn't mean Eina Pirushi is Batlu. It doesn't mean that they will cease, but rather they will be nullified. They will be in a state of bittul, nullification, similar to a candle in the sunlight. When you light a candle in the noonday sun, you practically don't see the flame. It's there. If you stick your finger in, you're going to burn it, but you can't even see the flame because it's so nullified by the powerful light of the sun. So the same thing, all the great divine revelations of all the other Yom Tovim will be betelim la'asid love. It will be nullified by the great light that will shine in Mashiach's times because of the revelation of Mashiach. Masha Enken Chanukah Purim, as opposed to Chanukah Purim, Shahaya Gilim B'chinas Atzmos, that the Chanukah and Purim, the revelation is from such a high level, from Hashem's very essence. Therefore, their light is not nullified in comparison to the light of Mashiach. Therefore, they're not nullified in comparison to the light of Mashiach's times. This is what it says also when Hashem addressed Zechariah Hanavi about this this nevuah with the Menoira Zav. He says, this is the word of Hashem. What was he saying over here? This is the word of Hashem. We know Shedvar Hashem Zu Halach. It says that Halach is considered the Dvar Hashem, the spoken word of Hashem. This is what Hashem commanded to do. So through Halacha, through Torah, we reach this very high level. And through this we come to what he concludes in the Haftarah, not with strength, not with might, only with my spirit will we be strengthened. Then everyone will know me, meaning Hashem's very essence. And the earth will be filled with the knowledge of Hashem, like the waters covers the sea.